Good morning. How are you?
So good to be here today, Jason. I'll just start by mentioning uh, for anyone listening, I have a stutter. Your internet is working just fine.
That's funny, Joze. Thanks for clarifying. I was actually, we're going to release this episode and we're going to talk about this. This is a special episode for me because we got connected through another one of my guests and you told me something that I didn't know about. So I guess now would be the perfect time, I think, to just tell the audience specifically why we're releasing this episode. And this is going to come out next week. If you just want to share why that is.
Absolutely. So May 10th until May 15th is National Stuttering Awareness Week, and it is going to be particularly significant this year because of the fact that President Biden has a stutter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does. Yeah, very cool. Well, I am really glad we're making this happen. I'm excited to get to know you. We've never spoken before. And so we're going to have a fun conversation right here on the show and release this. I usually don't release this quickly, but we're recording this on Friday, May 7th, and we're going to release this next Wednesday, which I guess would be the 12th. National Stuttering Week, which is something I had no idea was a thing.
I think it is definitely at times a misunderstood condition. I remember when we were in the middle of the US elections, I lost count of the number of times that I would receive videos of Joe Biden stumbling on his words, and of course the fact that he was getting stuck on his words was the butt of the joke. Mm-hmm. And then in my mind, I was thinking, regardless of which party someone might support, this is more about the principle of not jumping to inaccurate conclusions about someone based on a superficial characteristic that they might happen to have.
Yeah, Joze, I'd like to actually do something a little bit different for this episode, if you'd be up for it. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to actually, there's a list of questions I ask my guests, and I usually go in the same order, but for this specifically, because I think this is something that, like you said, is not widely understood. And I don't understand it either. This is not something, obviously I don't have a stutter. I don't have anybody in my family that stutters. So it's not present for me. I know people with stutters. I would love if we could maybe start this episode and describe a little bit more from like a medical or a neurological framework. Like what is a actual stutter when it comes to like, how is it defined medically? What does it mean? And what is it that you think that has it so misunderstood?
I think that is such a good way to start the episode. And you said that you did not have a stutter. One thing I often say in my talk is that everyone has a stutter. But we'll get into that metaphor
very curious
very curious in the episode. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of what a stutter is, it really is, in a sense, a communication disorder that results in disfluent speaking patterns, and it tends to start as soon as someone starts to speak. I know in my case, my mother had mentioned that as early as age 2, she picked up on some disfluency in my speaking. In terms of the exact origins, I know that people have talked about the brain in relation with development and the environment, but at its core, it certainly is a physiological thing as opposed to a psychological thing. And of course, it can cause a lot of psychological repercussions in terms of self-esteem and self-confidence and not fitting in, and what that means for the development and so on. But at its core, it certainly is it certainly is a physical thing that affects roughly 1% of the world's population. So we're talking between 3 and 4 million people in the US, between 70 and 80 million people worldwide. Yeah.
Interesting. Joze, would you mind if I ask you a couple more questions specifically regarding this? Regarding stuttering. So is a stutter something that is diagnosed by like a speech pathologist or a some sort of medical professional? Is that something that you actually get diagnosed with?
So because it is so obvious, I think it does not typically require an official diagnosis. It tends to be, if someone gets stuck whenever they speak, that tends to be the indication that someone has a stutter. There is, however, as you just mentioned now, the natural tendency to then go to a speech therapist. I went to a lot of speech therapists as a kid and a teenager. So that is definitely how it is treated, because there aren't any concrete cures per se, or concrete remedies, and anyone who tells you they can cure a stutter through their own method is most likely lying. They're because sometimes in the personal growth space, I'll stumble upon characters who will listen to me speak and then say, "Hey, by the way, I have a method that can cure a stutter, blah blah." And those things don't tend to be really reasonable or true. So there is no concrete solution. However, you can learn different techniques. The same way that I use a breathing technique to help me control the stutter, that is one of the ways that can help someone gain more control.
Yep. So I did a little bit of reading on this before we hopped on. And one of the things that I want to put out there, and I want you to correct me if this is wrong, but my understanding is a stutter is no indication of intelligence. It's no indication of what you're thinking. It's purely the translation from your thoughts into your, like the pathway, I guess it would be like the neurological motor pathway that connects your brain to your ability to speak. So you're thinking at the same speed that I am. And it just takes your physiologically, it just takes longer for you to form those things and have them come out. So there's no indication of intelligence. There's no indication that you're not thinking at a high speed. It's the forming of the actual language out of your mouth that is the thing that there's just something that's different. And that's what a stutter actually is. Is my understanding correct there?
Yeah, in that sense, it is indeed not related to intelligence or mental clarity. There is a disconnect between how the word emerges fluently in the brain and how it is produced. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Joze, what else should we know about this before we kind of kick in and get to know you a little bit more? Because I think this is an important topic that a lot of people just quite frankly don't know a lot about. What else do you think we should know?
Yeah. So one really interesting thing about stuttering is that if you think about the iceberg, you only see about maybe 10% of that iceberg, whereas 90% is hidden. And with something like a stutter, you might be able to see the speech blocks. However, that is a small part of the total experience of being a person who stutters. What really ends up acting as an obstacle is all of the negative emotions of shame and embarrassment and anger and low self-esteem, and most significantly, the tendency to avoid speaking and people. So that is really common among people who stutter. Of course, not every one of them. You might come across once in a while a super extroverted person who stutters, who has not allowed it to get in the way as much. But if I speak for myself and on behalf of a lot of people that I have met along the way, there is this tendency to hold back immensely and to avoid anything related to speaking.
Got it. Okay, well, I think we're actually, I'm learning in real time, just as you're as the rest of the audience is too. I think I want to go, if it's okay with you, I'd actually like to go into some of the questions I was going to ask you, and I think we're going to flesh a little bit more of this out as we go through this. So I want to get to know you as well and not spend all the
Yeah.
time on this, because this is a small part of who you are. And I think you've got some cool stuff to share with us about how you, like, what you're actually up to in the world, which is all related to what we've been talking about. So I got some questions for you. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. First question. What's something you nerd out about?
I nerd out about anything related to personal development, and this encompasses a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
It can be something like mindfulness and meditation on one end of the spectrum, all the way to learning more about psychology, or about inclusion, about and even learning about different cultures, and it it really varies. But we can go with the com com we can go with the comprehensive title of personal development.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, you and I are alike, my friend. That's what I do. So I'm curious, what's, if you had to select one thing that you've done for your own personal development, the thing that's made the biggest impact on your life, and you had to select one thing, and I'm sure there's a lot. What's the thing that you've done that has made the biggest impact in your life that you see under the personal development bucket?
Mm. And is that a concrete behavior or a mindset shift?
Whatever, whichever one of those you think has made the biggest impact on your life. So I actually don't have I'm sorry to be annoying. I don't have an answer for you. It's more like, what's the thing
Okay.
that you see?
Mm. Yes. So if I look back at my journey, I could say that one really crucial step I took along the way was joining Toastmasters.
Nice.
When I was in, yeah, when I was in my second year in university, I had asked all of my professors to exempt me from every single presentation.
Mm.
In my last year, however, I ended up joining Toastmasters. And I think even though I went through a lot of ups and downs in the years to come before I really started to see amazing transformation in the past 3 or 4 years. Toastmasters was perhaps that first approach to dealing with my stuttering and the fear that surrounded speaking in a in a radical manner. So I had come to the conclusion that because the obstacle seemed so radical, the solution also had to be equally radical. And in that sense, because I was avoiding speaking almost entirely, just challenging myself, for example, to to speak on the phone with my grandmother would not have been a strong enough catalyst to bring about that change that I was desperately seeking.
Mm. Yeah, Jose, I'm glad you brought up Toastmasters. I feel like I should reach out and see if they want to sponsor this episode. I'm also I'm a big Toastmasters fan. I joined a few years ago. I'm actually going to be the VP of membership for the chapter that I'm a member of. I'm a member of Brooklyn Heights Toastmasters. Great group of people. If any of you are listening, it's a great group of people. I've said this on the show a couple times, and I know you're going to agree with me. If anybody is scared of public speaking and you don't think you can do it, or you happen to have a stutter, or you're just nervous, Toastmasters is the perfect place because it's going to be supportive, because the whole point of Toastmasters is you get to go in. It's supportive. Our group is extremely supportive. I'm sure that the group you're a member of is too. But besides that, there's no stakes. You're not speaking to make money. You're not speaking to, you're not on a stage. Nobody's paying you. You're just there literally just to practice. I think Toastmasters is one of the greatest structures for people who want, and for you said, for personal development, because not only do you get to work on your public speaking skills, you get to work on standing up and being seen. You get to work on writing speeches. You get to do, there's a thing called table topics that you know what that is, where you have to make up stuff on the spot. And there's just so many skills. And it doesn't matter if you quote unquote fail or you're the best speaker on the planet. There's no stakes to it. There are competitions, but even those, it's just really all for fun. So we should probably together go to Toastmasters and say, hey, would you like to sponsor this episode next week? This episode of the podcast sponsored by Toastmasters International. Very cool.
And
Very
in fact,
cool.
And jokes aside, it wouldn't be the worst idea to reach out to them and at least share the episode, because I know that the fact that Toastmasters has played the role that it has on my journey as a person who stutters, and especially during National Stuttering Awareness Week, I'm sure they would want to hear about this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. If there's any organizations we can send this episode to, anybody listening who, in your network that's part of this community, I will obviously market the episode, put it out, and I'll give a summary of what we talk about, and we're going to release it and specifically say we're doing this week for this reason. But if you have anybody in your network who would like to put this out and share it, yes, please, that would be great. So actually, this is such perfect timing. You're such a good guest, because the next question I want to talk to you about is speaking, specifically giving speeches, which you obviously do. So I give you 5 minutes, this question's kind of funny for Toastmasters, because in Toastmasters, most prepared speeches go between 5 and 7 minutes. So you got a Toastmaster speech that you get to give, Joze. And you have one speech to give, and everybody in the world is going to hear it. What would you give your speech on, and what would your call to action be to the audience?
It's such an interesting question, because had you asked it a few years ago, before I started sharing my own story and the insights I've learned along the way, I might have given you a different answer. And in fact, I'll never forget this. I was supposed to do my 10th speech at Toastmasters.
Oh, okay. So you're doing the pathway, doing the old pathways.
Exactly, yeah. And I was about to do my 10th speech, and this was maybe 4 years ago. And I remember that the theme of that speech was inspiration inspire your audience. And at the time, I had not done a single speech about stuttering or about my journey. And I recall thinking, what can I do this speech about? I recall even asking some of the people in the club if they had any ideas for what I could do a speech about that had the purpose of inspiring the audience. And I recall one of them said, "You're kidding, right?" And I I did not I did not see it that way at all. However, if you ask me today, I definitely would make I definitely would deliver a speech about the fact that everyone has a stutter. It's the thing that might hold us back in life. You want to speak up in a meeting and yet you remain quiet. That's your stutter. You want to start a new initiative or a project, and yet the fear of failure holds you back. That's your stutter. You want to say hello to someone, and the fear of rejection keeps you from doing that. That's your stutter. And when I look at my own journey of having faced those fears, it wasn't that the fear went away over the past few years. It's just that my relationship with that fear changed drastically. And if I could go back in time and tell my old self three things, the first thing would be, it's okay to be different. Own what makes you unique. And the truth is, every person on earth thinks of themselves as being unique. And so the first thing is to own that. The second thing is to use fear as a compass. I used to go to the mall before the pandemic once a week, where I would challenge myself by talking to 100 complete strangers. I must have talked to tens of thousands of complete strangers over the past few years. And this mindset shift allowed me to get to the conclusion that fear and action are not mutually exclusive. Fear and action can coexist. And the third and last thing I'll share for now is, I often get asked, what was the turning point on your journey? And I find that sometimes that question is heavily influenced by a romanticized idea of transformation. One that assumes that all we need for change is a single moment when something just clicks. I have not found that to be the case.
Yeah.
For me, it was millions of micro moments of bravery where I repeatedly did what I did not felt like doing, or what I was afraid of doing, again and again and again.
Yeah, I love that. I'm with the same thing. This is why in the personal development space, like professional, like I'm a coach, there's public speaking coaches, there's all sorts of people who have all sorts of offerings around this. When I see an offering that's like will help you very, very quickly, I always wonder what's actually happening there, because the human brain, physiologically, we're just not built to like turn on a dime. We have years and years and years and years of habits and mindset and things. And I'm not saying it takes years and years and years to shift that around, but it does take time. I'm so with you that the change happens over a period of time. It never happens at once. Yet you can have a breakthrough in something. It sounds like you've had some breakthroughs, but then reliably, you're going to want to go at a subconscious level, at an ego level. You're going to want to go back to the thing that you know how to do, that's comfortable for you, and building up that habit over time, that resilience over time is the thing that makes all the difference. A good example, and you mentioned meditation. If anybody's never meditated and then you try to meditate for 20 minutes, you're going to be pulling your hair out. It just takes time. You just train your body just like you train it to run a marathon, or you train it to lift weights, whatever that thing would be.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Well, that is a great speech, and the call to action is beautiful. With that, Joze, we're going to take a brief commercial break, and we'll be right back.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
Okay, we are back. You still with me? Ready to rock? Okay. So now this is part of the show where generally I have the guest share anything else they want that you'd want us to know about you. And we kind of started the episode with some things specific to the stuttering, but there's a lot more to you than just that. So what would you like us as the audience, and what would you like me to know about you that we don't today?
I have never been asked this question.
That's why I ask it.
When I sing, I don't stutter at all. And
when you sing?
Yes. And it is something when I do stand up, I have a bit about that. I say stuttering is extremely paradoxical. Some words flow right out. Others get stuck, as if I have bad Wi-Fi. And when I sing, I don't stutter at all. And when people find out, they ask me, instead of speaking, why don't you always sing?
Yeah.
And I think because I don't want to look deranged. I know you think I would save so much time, but have you ever seen a musical, can you imagine if you eh, if you Jason, come up to me one day and say, "Hey Joze, how was your weekend?" And I'm like, "Thank you for asking, my friend. My weekend was nothing but grand."
So
And it would get.
Jose, I have to say one thing.
Mhm.
I'm laughing because I know multiple people, this would be their dream, including my wife, to just live in a musical all the time. Everything is pure singing, and everything is like a big musical number. Like a simple question turns into like this beautiful, full, like 4-minute Broadway style number. So, in some ways it would be pretty cool.
In some ways, yes, it would actually, yeah. So the singing is one thing. Something else is I had mentioned this earlier. I really like learning about other cultures. I've spent some time in Latin America. I had lived in Mexico City back in 2013. And I also had spent some time in Colombia, in Peru, and Brazil. And I feel as though there is a lot to learn from Latin American cultures in terms of the approach to life.
I want to ask you a question about the singing and the speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a assertion here based on my limited knowledge, is that the reason that you don't that you, and I'm going to assume, but you tell me if this is not correct, that others who have a speaking stutter also don't suffer from this. Is it because it uses a different neurological pathway?
It is definitely a very good question. So based on the research, and based on the research I have come across, that is correct. They say that that singing occurs in the right side of the brain, which is the creative side of the brain, whereas language happens in the left side of the brain. So already we are indeed talking about two different areas of the brain. And this also explains why sometimes you'll hear a British singer sing a song in what sounds like American English.
Oh my God, all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that you hear that all the time, and then you hear them speak. You're like, whoa, that is not how you sound when you sing.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And
so interesting.
And one more thing about that is the breathing can also be a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the breathing technique that I use for my stutter is based on it's chest breathing, which is similar to what opera singers might use when they project their singing voice. So there's also this other element of breathing as well, which can be different with singing versus speaking.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very cool. Well, thanks for like entertaining my naive questions. So I'm learning a lot on here, and I want to give you a break and actually make you the host here. And also want to give the audience a break from hearing me pepper you with questions and give you the chance to do the same to me.
Nice. That
exactly.
is.
So you are.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So I'm handing you the virtual host mic.
Wow. That is really, really cool.
and yes. And so what I'd love if what would you like to ask me that I can answer for the audience? And you are welcome to sing me the question or state the question to me. However you like to me. I'm up for all of it. So what do you got for me?
That is that's really cool. I think I've had a few of those conversations in the past, but I had never been asked to do something like this. So I'm really excited about this. So what was it in your life that sparked an interest in personal development? Because I'd like to think that even though I don't necessarily believe in these single turning points that change everything, I do believe that for someone to have an interest in personal growth, they've almost always gone through something, whatever that thing is, that leads to this journey.
Yeah. Yes, it's a wonderful question. And I'm going to put myself on the clock, because if I don't, I'm reliable. I'm reliable to make you the host for the rest of the episode for another 30 minutes or so. So I'm not going to do that. So I've always been big on personal development, but it was specifically in the context of how am I better at my job? And so I grew up in sales. So I worked in sales for most of my career. And I was always interested in how can I do that better? How can I be a better employee? So personal development, but specifically in the context of how does this make me more money? How does this make me more successful? How does it make me better, whatever role I'm at the time? And about 3 years ago, I realized that I had never really invested in myself for like things that I just enjoy doing. So I enjoyed sales, but it was more like, oh, like there's an output here versus like, hey, what's the thing you actually care about? What's the thing that you enjoy doing? What's the thing that you think you lean into? And so I went and I took a certification course through, I won't name the company here, but I really liked it. And I wasn't sure why I liked it. I just liked it. And then from there, I just kind of had this string of events where I felt like I was investing in myself for me, and it wasn't just for the output of my work. It was part of it, obviously, but it was more like, hey, I just want to be a better human. I think the other thing I would say is we have a 5-year-old daughter. And so this was, I think, also becoming a parent, you look a little bit more at who you want to be in the world when you're, I've been married for a while, but we just, we didn't have any kids for a while either. So it's kind of like you're doing your thing, you're working, you're doing your thing, you're married, that's cool. How do you show up for each other? And then you add this new life to your world. And you go, hey, like there's this other human that's going to need things from you, need a lot from you. Who do you want to be for them? What's the role model you want to be? And I realized that I was kind of leaving myself to the side. And so to answer your question, it was started with really just kind of this like gut thing. Like, hey, like there's more. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do to improve? Like, what do you want to that's going to help you holistically? And from there, this led me in all sorts of places. I got certified in a couple things. I ended up hiring a coach. From hiring that coach, I went and ended up doing a coach training program. Through doing that coach training program, I became a leader in that program that I'm a leader in now, and became a full-time coach. And like, so it was like this string of events that led us to here right now, because there's no way I would be doing this podcast if I wouldn't have taken that journey, because I probably would still be in corporate and I'd be like, why am I doing a podcast? Like a podcast, how does that help my sales job? And now I don't look at it that way. I look at like, oh, I love doing this podcast, so I'm going to do it. So that is the sort of long-winded answer to your question, is a string of events that really came from my gut, and were not like, they weren't logical. They're things like, oh, I feel like I can do this. I just went out and did them. And here we are today.
And I find sales to be such an interesting field, because, for example, when I got into speaking professionally, I had not considered how much of it is sales, in terms of having all of those conversations with potential decision makers, and then conveying the value of what the story is, what the message is, and how it might get them and their audience from point A to point B. What are 3 psychological truths about sales, or specifically about human behavior within the context of sales, that you've learned instinctively throughout your years in sales, but that are not necessarily common sense or intuitively known by the average person?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. 3. I got to come up with 3. You got me on the spot here. First one is, I think it's widely known, but it's something that most salespeople forget. People buy on emotion, no matter what. Even, and so I worked in technology sales, which is all about the data and the ROI and like the things, but people always buy on emotion at the end of the day. And people always buy selfishly, meaning that, and for anybody listening who's in like tech sales or even things like insurance, things that seem very tactical, at the end of the day, you're buying something, but you're making a decision based on emotion. Sometimes the emotion is, hey, I like Jason as a salesperson. I believe in him. I trust him. And because of that, I'm going to make this purchase. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm making this purchase because I believe it's going to increase my standing inside of the organization, which makes me feel important, which has me get promoted. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm scared I'm going to get fired. So I'm making this decision because it's the cheapest option. And this is what I believe will keep me employed. So that's number 1, is sales always has an emotional component to it, even when it doesn't feel like it. Number 2, it's not usually just about the money. And I mean that on both sides. I've seen deals and I've been parts of deals where we were more expensive and kind of provided the same type of product, same type of value, and quite frankly, probably the similar kind of like the relationship softer part of sales. But people, and this is another widely known thing in sales. People buy from people they like. Yes. And people also, companies usually have more of a budget than you think they do, if they can justify why you, Joze or Jason, are the person that they should be doing business with. So that's number 2, is it's not always about the money. Oh, I got to come up with a 3rd on the spot. This is a good one. Let me think about this.
And these two have been amazing so far. I think
Thank you. Thank you.
Emphasis on emotion, and then on likability and malleability is also interesting. And I just felt like repeating them to
Thank you.
also give you some extra time to think about.
You're a great co-host. Thank you.
Think about número tres.
All right. Let me see if I can stall for a little bit longer. No, I've actually got something. Sales can get a very bad rap out in the marketplace. There are, I won't call out industries, but there's certain industries like, oh, you're like this sort of salesperson. And I do believe, and this is just the way I see the world, is salespeople are good people too. And for those who don't work in sales, not all, just like not all teachers are good people or police officers. Yeah, there's bad eggs everywhere. What I don't think people realize a lot, they're like, oh, I don't want to be sold to. Like, I get that. Or like, hey, like, I don't want to deal with somebody that feels like they're just trying to sell me. I've never met an industry where the salespeople aren't under pressure. And that's pressure for the company to keep their job. So in sales, you're kind of interviewing for your job every month or every quarter or every year, whatever whatever your target is. The other thing is that, yes, it's financial, but it's also a lot of people that go into sales. It's about winning and feeling valuable and all those things, which drives up behavior that probably isn't all that authentic to who these people really are. So I say this because, I'm just gonna call it the industry, because not because I believe they're anybody bad. It's just like used car salesman. Like, oh, it's like a used car salesman. Those people are probably paid on almost all commission. Most salespeople also have families and have kids to feed and have mortgages to pay, just like the rest of us. So when you recognize that they are specifically incented and make money on that, and they also had the same, quite frankly, the same probably scarcity that most of us have around money. It's like, oh, where am I going to, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to save for retirement? I got kids going to college. That's going to drive up behavior that probably isn't authentic. So the last thing I would say about the universal truth in sales, and I don't know that's universal, again, just a caveat, there are bad eggs everywhere, but most of the people in sales are good people. Like, there are people selling bad products. There are people who sell, quite frankly, like, sketchy products. There are people who sell things that, like, in my opinion, don't have value. They're scams. Even them, those people probably need to do that job because I need to pay the bills. So the thing I would offer to the audience is to get curious about what's having the person operate this way. And hey, this could be the way their style, and it doesn't work for you and you don't buy from them. And that's something for them to look at. But before you automatically judge a salesperson, or next time you go to buy a car and you walk up and you're like, I don't want anybody to come up from in the lot, just doing their job. It's how they make their money. Just like all of you listening, you all make your money in a certain way too. And the other thing, the last thing to say in this whole thing, and now you're getting me passionate about this, is we all buy things from salespeople all the time. Like, if you look around your house, you bought your house from a salesperson. You bought your shoes from a salesperson. You bought everything you own from some sort of salesperson, whether it be e-commerce, whether it be in person. So like, people are like, oh, I don't like sales. I'm like, well, you would have nothing if you didn't have people selling that. Just to give you an example, the furniture that lives inside of your house or your apartment, even if you ordered it from e-commerce, those products are coming from a manufacturer somewhere who has a salesperson who's selling those to the store you bought them from. So somewhere in this chain of command, or this chain, there are salespeople. And you can tell that I'm very passionate. So any salespeople that are listening to this, I'd love to hear your feedback on this, because you're probably on my side. I'm with you. And I really enjoyed these questions there. I've never had these on my show before, and I've recorded almost 80 episodes. So just say thank you for being a host and putting me on the spot. And I'm going to grab back the microphone from you, because I feel like you're going to ask me some more challenging questions, and I'm tired.
Especially on a Friday, I and making you work. So
Yeah, I'm
I
good for all.
agree.
No, it's really good. Really great question. Thank
Yeah.
you. This is this probably won't surprise you. When it comes to Toastmasters, I love table topics a lot more than I love scripted speeches. I much prefer to make it up on the spot, which gets me in trouble sometimes, but all good. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I have a couple more questions for you. I just want to make sure you've got the time for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What's the thing that you're most proud of?
I am most proud of turning an obstacle into a pretext for growth, turning it into the way forward, to use that quote from Marcus Aurelius. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That is a philosophy I have wholeheartedly applied to my life, because I grew up avoiding speaking in people almost entirely for more than 25 years, out of the fear of being judged for sounding different. I did everything that I could. I would beg my professors to exempt me from presentations. I would do everything to avoid speaking and people. And the fact that today I speak professionally and perform stand-up comedy, I still have to pinch myself once in a while. And that is one of the things, if not the thing, I am the most proud of, both for the personal aspect of it, but also for the impact that it's having. I keep on hearing from people after my talks that I give at organizations or conferences or schools, and the messages I receive about how it was a life-changing message and how it empowered them to own who they are and take action in spite of fear or discomfort. All those things have been so incredibly fulfilling, and I definitely would say that I've been really proud of all of those moments of impact.
Very cool. Well, you are the perfect setup guy, because the next question I was going to ask you about as we start to wrap up today is, where can the audience find you? And I'd love to hear a little bit about the kind of stages you like to speak on, what you speak on. So if anybody's listening and says, "Hey, I think he'd be great for my event," I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your stand-up, and if there's any videos, or if you're going to be, where you do that. And just overall, how can the audience connect with you and find you?
Absolutely. This has been a super enjoyable conversation in terms of where the audience can find me. And the good thing about having a stutter with this question is that I give you all the time in the world to grab your phone and look me up in real time. So on Instagram, it's Joze, Joze. On LinkedIn, it's just my full name, Joze Piranian. In terms of, or same with my website, my full name. In terms of my speaking, I've been delivering a lot of keynotes on diversity and inclusion on the one hand at different organizations and conferences across industries, whether it's for an HR audience or non-HR audiences, and as well about resilience and overcoming fears. I am really passionate about those two topics because they've each played a huge role on my journey. In terms of my stand-up comedy, lately I have not been performing inside of physical comedy clubs that much. However, I've been doing some stand-up performances for different types of corporate events. I also run a virtual comedy show called Sofa Laughs, where I invite a few different comedians who've been on Just for Laughs and all of these big platforms to join me and to perform for an organization or for a private event. So in terms of things that are happening online, once in a while, I will have an event that is open to the public and connecting with me on Instagram or on LinkedIn is typically the best way to know what is coming up next.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'll put all this in the show notes. So even though you did give us plenty of spacious time to write it down, if you're listening in the car, you're walking or something, everything about Joze just said will be in the show notes. And last thing, well, two things. One, I want to express my gratitude for having you on today and for sharing your story. It's very inspirational to me. Thank you for your grace with me as I'm asking questions that I could probably go look up. And I looked up a few of these, but I figured I'm like, hey, let me ask somebody, and like the personal experience. So thank you. I also want to thank you for being an inspiration to others out there, because one of the things that really struck me that you said earlier is this can have a really psychological effect on people who suffer from a stutter. I can imagine how challenging that would be. And I think you're an inspiration to those out there, and President Biden as well, that this doesn't need to define you, and you can actually make something of it and make it work and actually create something new from it that actually just makes you unique. And it's not actually something that people are going to see as a problem or a challenge. So I want to acknowledge you for that. It's really, really cool to hear your story.
Thank you for these amazing words, and thank you for having me on today. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really unorthodox in many ways and very dynamic, and just a very dynamic exchange. So I really enjoyed this one.
All right. Last thing, I have a tradition on the show. Need you, Joze, to leave us with some words of wisdom, and they should fit on a Post-it note or a nice little Instagram post. What do you got for us?
I'd like to end this with a quote by the Sufi poet Rumi. It's a quote I often think about, and I'd like to conclude this episode with it. It says, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open?"
That's it's not heavy, but I'm like, man, that's such an accurate analogy. What I hear in that is a self-imposed prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to get this episode out early next week. Congratulations to you on everything you're up to. I know the reason we're wrapping up now is you actually have a big meeting with a big company for some inspirational stuff you're doing with them. And I would love to have you come back on again sometime and talk about your journey from there. I'm sure the next time you come on, you'll have a lot of new stuff to share with you. And again, thank you for being on today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll speak again soon, Jason.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.